Once upon a time, in a small village nestled deep in the heart of Nigeria, there lived a young boy named Kunta. Kunta was unlike any other child in the village. He had no parents, no siblings, and was shunned by all who knew him. The villagers whispered that he was cursed, that his very presence brought misfortune upon them. But despite their hatred, the villagers could not deny one undeniable fact about Kunta. He possessed an uncanny ability to solve any problem, no matter how big or small. From settling disputes between neighbors to curing mysterious illnesses, Kunta's wisdom and insight were unmatched. And yet, the more he helped his people, the more they resented him. "Why should we be indebted to this parentless outcast?" they grumbled. "He must be using witchcraft to bewitch us." Kunta bore their insults and ingratitude with quiet dignity, never once lashing out in anger or bitterness. He knew that his gift was a blessing, not a curse, and he was determined to use it for good, even if his efforts went unappreciated. As the years passed, Kunta grew from a scrawny boy into a strong, handsome young man. His reputation as a problem solver spread beyond the borders of his village, attracting the attention of those in need from far and wide. But still, his own people remained blinded by their prejudice, unable to see the treasure that lived among them. One day, a wealthy merchant from a neighboring village came to seek Kunta's help. His daughter had fallen gravely ill, and no healer had been able to cure her. Desperate and out of options, the merchant begged Kunta to come to his village and save his beloved child. Kunta agreed without hesitation, gathering his few belongings and setting off on the long journey. When he arrived at the merchant's village, he was greeted with suspicion and hostility from the locals, who had heard rumors of the strange outcast boy with the power to solve any problem. But Kunta paid them no mind, focusing all his energy on helping the sick girl. For days, he remained by her bedside, using his knowledge of herbs and healing to nurse her back to health. Slowly but surely, the girl's fever broke and color returned to her cheeks. The merchant and his family were overjoyed, showering Kunta with praise and gratitude. Word of his miraculous healing spread throughout the village, and soon people were lining up at his door, begging for his help with their own troubles. Among those who sought Kunta's aid was the village chief, a proud and powerful man who ruled his people with an iron fist. The chief's wife had recently given birth to their first child, but the baby would not stop crying day or night. The exhausted parents were at their wits' end, and as a last resort, the chief swallowed his pride and went to Kunta. Using his wisdom and intuition, Kunta quickly realized that the baby was suffering from colic, a common but painful condition that caused stomach discomfort and incessant wailing. He showed the chief's wife how to massage the baby's tummy and brew a soothing herbal tea, and within hours the infant was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. The grateful chief declared Kunta an honorary member of the village and offered him a permanent home there. At first, Kunta was hesitant to accept, fearing that he would never truly be accepted by these strangers. But as he looked around at the smiling faces of those he had helped, he realized that perhaps he had finally found a place where he belonged. Over time, Kunta became an integral part of village life, using his gifts to help anyone in need. He settled disputes, healed the sick, and offered sage advice to young and old alike. The villagers came to love and respect him, marveling at his kindness and generosity of spirit. Even the chief came to rely on Kunta's counsel, often seeking his opinion on matters of great importance. And as the two men worked side by side for the good of the village, a deep bond of friendship began to form between them. But not everyone in the village was happy about Kunta's growing influence. A group of jealous elders, led by a man named Musa, resented the young outsider who had won the hearts of their people. They feared that Kunta would eventually usurp their power and take control of the village for himself. Musa began to spread vicious rumors about Kunta, accusing him of using dark magic to manipulate the minds of the villagers. At first, no one believed these baseless lies, but as Musa's campaign of hate intensified, some began to whisper that perhaps there was truth to his words. Kunta was deeply hurt by these accusations, but he refused to stoop to Musa's level and retaliate. He continued to serve the village with compassion and integrity, trusting that the truth would eventually come to light. One day, the chief's beloved daughter Amina fell seriously ill with a mysterious disease that baffled even the most skilled healers. As she lay on her deathbed, the desperate chief turned to Kunta as his last hope. Kunta examined Amina carefully, using all his knowledge and intuition to diagnose her condition. After much thought and prayer, he realized that she was suffering from a rare poison that had been slipped into her food by an unknown enemy. Kunta worked tirelessly to brew an antidote, using rare herbs and medicinal plants that he had gathered from the surrounding forests. For 3 days and nights he labored without rest, determined to save the life of the chief's precious daughter. On the morning of the 4th day, Amina's fever finally broke, and she opened her eyes for the first time in days. The overjoyed chief wept tears of relief and gratitude, declaring that Kunta had performed a miracle. But Musa and his followers were not content to let Kunta bask in the glow of his triumph. They concocted a twisted plot to frame Kunta for Amina's poisoning, hoping to turn the village against him once and for all. Under cover of darkness, they snuck into Kunta's hut and planted a vial of the same poison used on Amina, along with a scrap of paper bearing Kunta's handwriting. The next morning, they publicly accused Kunta of attempting to murder the chief's daughter in a bid for power. The village was thrown into chaos as people took sides in the bitter feud. Some remained loyal to Kunta, while others joined Musa's angry mob, demanding that the young healer be banished from the village forever. In the end, the chief had no choice but to hold a public trial to determine Kunta's fate. As the villagers gathered in the square, Musa smugly presented his false evidence, certain that he had sealed Kunta's doom. But Kunta was not so easily beaten. With quiet dignity, he faced his accusers and calmly refuted their baseless charges. Using his razor-sharp intellect, he picked apart Musa's flimsy story, exposing the lies and inconsistencies in his testimony. As the truth began to emerge, the tide of public opinion slowly turned in Kunta's favor. One by one, the villagers who had been swayed by Musa's slander came forward to apologize and pledge their support for the brave young healer. In a final, desperate ploy, Musa tried to attack Kunta physically, lunging at him with a knife in front of the shocked crowd. But Kunta was too quick, disarming his assailant with a swift, decisive blow. As Musa lay cowering on the ground, Kunta looked down at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I forgive you," he said softly. "I know that your heart is filled with hate and jealousy, but I bear you no ill will. I hope that someday you will find peace." With those words, he turned and walked away, leaving Musa to wallow in his own bitterness and shame. The chief, moved by Kunta's compassion and grace, publicly declared him innocent of all charges and welcomed him back into the village with open arms. From that day forward, Kunta's place in the village was unquestioned. He became a trusted advisor to the chief and a beloved figure among the people. And as the years passed, his legend only grew, spreading to distant villages and towns. But even as he basked in the love and respect of his adopted home, Kunta never forgot the pain of his troubled past. He knew all too well the sting of rejection and the cruel weight of prejudice, and so he made it his life's mission to help those who were outcast and marginalized, just as he had once been. He took in orphans and widows, tended to the sick and downtrodden, and fought tirelessly against injustice wherever he found it. As Kunta grew older and wiser, his thoughts began to turn increasingly to the village of his birth, the place where he had endured so much suffering and heartache. Though he had found happiness and purpose in his new life, a part of him still yearned for the acceptance and love of his own people. One day, a traveler arrived from Kunta's old village with troubling news. A terrible drought had struck the land, and the crops were failing. People were starving, and disease was running rampant. In their desperation, the elders had finally swallowed their pride and sent out a plea for help to the surrounding villages. Kunta's heart broke at the thought of his people suffering, even after all the pain they had caused him. Without a moment's hesitation, he gathered a group of volunteers and set out on the long journey back to his birthplace, determined to do whatever he could to help. When they arrived, they found a village on the brink of collapse. The once proud people were now gaunt and hollow-eyed, their spirits broken by hunger and despair. But Kunta refused to give up on them. He organized work crews to dig new wells and irrigation ditches, and taught the villagers how to plant drought-resistant crops. He set up a makeshift hospital to treat the sick and wounded, and worked tirelessly to distribute food and supplies to those in need. At first, the villagers were wary of accepting help from the boy they had once scorned and mistreated. But as they saw the selfless dedication and compassion that Kunta poured into his work, their hearts began to soften. Slowly but surely, they came to see him in a new light, not as a cursed outcast, but as a true hero and savior. As the weeks passed, the village began to recover from the brink of disaster. The crops started to grow again, and the sick began to heal. And as the people regained their strength and hope, they also found the courage to face the shame of their past actions. One by one, they came to Kunta to beg his forgiveness for the way they had treated him as a child. They hung their heads in sorrow and regret, acknowledging the terrible wrong they had done to an innocent boy. Kunta, in his infinite wisdom and grace, forgave them all without hesitation. He understood that they had acted out of ignorance and fear, not true malice, and he knew that holding on to bitterness and resentment would only poison his own heart in the end. With the village on the mend, Kunta could have easily returned to his adopted home and resumed his life of comfort and respect, but he knew that his work was not yet done. He had seen firsthand the suffering and injustice that plagued so many communities across the land, and he felt a deep calling to continue fighting for the oppressed and downtrodden. And so, with a heavy heart, he bid farewell to his birth village once more, this time as a beloved friend rather than a scorned outcast. He set out on a new journey, determined to use his gifts and wisdom to help as many people as he could. For many years, Kunta wandered the land, never staying in one place for too long. He became known far and wide as a healer, a teacher, and a champion of the poor and powerless. Wherever he went, he left behind a trail of hope and inspiration, touching countless lives with his boundless compassion and unwavering integrity. But even as he worked tirelessly for the betterment of others, Kunta could not help but feel a deep longing for a place to call his own, a community where he could put down roots and build a life of meaning and purpose. That chance came unexpectedly one day when he found himself in the kingdom of a wise and just ruler named King Adisa. The king had heard tales of Kunta's great deeds and invited him to stay as a guest in his palace. During his time there, Kunta caught the eye of King Adisa's beautiful and brilliant daughter, Princess Zola. The two quickly fell deeply in love, bonding over their shared passion for justice and their desire to make the world a better place. As their relationship blossomed, King Adisa came to see Kunta as the son he had always wanted. He marveled at the young man's wisdom, integrity, and strength of character, and knew that he would make a worthy successor to the throne. And so, in a grand ceremony attended by people from all over the kingdom, Kunta and Zola were married in a joyous celebration of love and unity. The people cheered as their beloved princess and the legendary healer joined hands and hearts, sealing their commitment to each other and to the greater good. As the years passed, Kunta and Zola worked side by side to build a kingdom of justice, compassion, and prosperity. They welcomed people of all backgrounds and beliefs, creating a diverse and thriving community where everyone had a chance to succeed and find happiness. Under their wise and benevolent rule, the kingdom flourished like never before. Farms and villages thrived, trade and commerce boomed, and the arts and sciences reached new heights of achievement. And at the center of it all was Kunta, the once despised outcast who had risen to become a king among men. But even as he sat upon his throne, surrounded by the love and respect of his people, Kunta never forgot the lessons of his difficult past. He knew that true greatness came not from wealth or power, but from the size of one's heart and the depth of one's compassion. And so, he continued to work tirelessly for the betterment of all, using his position and influence to lift up the downtrodden and give hope to the hopeless. He became a shining example of what one person could achieve through love, courage, and an unshakable commitment to justice. As Kunta grew old and grey, he looked back on his long and eventful life with a sense of deep fulfillment. He had faced countless trials and overcome unimaginable odds, all in the service of a greater good. And in the end, he had found the acceptance, love, and purpose that he had always craved. But even in his final days, Kunta's work was not finished, for he knew that the struggle for justice and equality was a never-ending battle, one that would require the dedication and sacrifice of generations to come. And so, with his last breath, he passed on his wisdom and his vision to his children and grandchildren, entrusting them with the sacred duty of carrying on his legacy. He urged them to always stand up for what was right, to fight for the oppressed and the voiceless, and to never lose sight of the power of love and compassion to change the world. As the great king Kunta slipped away into the mists of legend, his spirit lived on in the hearts and minds of all those he had touched. And though the kingdom he had built would face many challenges and trials in the years to come, his memory would endure as a beacon of hope and inspiration for all time. For in the end, the true measure of a life is not in the accolades or the riches one accumulates, but in the lives one touches and the difference one makes in the world. And by that measure, Kunta was truly a king among men, a shining example of the very best that humanity has to offer. And so, the story of Kunta, the outcast who became a king, passed into legend, a testament to the power of love, courage, and compassion to overcome even the greatest of odds. May his memory live on forever, and may his example inspire us all to be our best selves and to never stop fighting for what is right.